The challenge lies in the environmental impacts that we need to reduce. The solution is in hydrogen. Let's find out more. Clean hydrogen is touted to be the game changer of the future. It gives a promise of delivering good, paying, clean energy jobs and realizing a net zero economy by 2050, and that's what we need for the Vision 2040 that we're living through right now. What is in it for Oman, and how will our spending power save the planet? This is The Hydrogen Story, where we talk about the biggest energy transition in history. This show is in support of the Green Hydrogen Summit that is between the 5th and the 7th of December at the OCEC soon. Make sure you attend that event. With me today is Ms. Monica Trench, the Hydrogen Business Development for BP Oman. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
No, thank you very much. So let's get straight away to the questions. How is hydrogen produced today around the world and Oman, and what is it used for?
So that's a great question. Hydrogen today is being produced from fossil fuel actually. Is really taking natural gas and essentially using a chemical process to split the carbon from the hydrogen in the natural gas and then emit the carbon into the atmosphere.
Okay.
And hence, actually, this is why it's called grey hydrogen, the hydrogen we produce and use today, because it is still emitting greenhouse gases and then using fossil fuel. And actually, today, globally, we use about 50 million tons of hydrogen, and which emits 830 million tons of carbon dioxide. Oh. To put that into perspective, that is the total emission of the UK and Indonesia combined. So it's a lot of carbon emissions, right?
Yes.
And then you say, well, who's using this grey hydrogen today? So hydrogen is actually a feedstock for many industrial processes like refinery, chemical processes, petchem processes, such as ammonia production, fertilizers, and also used for treating metals.
So hydrogen has been used and is being used right now? Because
Exactly.
in my eyes, there is suddenly the hype about hydrogen like it's a new product. So how long ago has the world been using hydrogen in whatever form it has been using it?
So maybe let me readjust the question a little bit. So you're absolutely right. The hydrogen has been used for a long time in the world, in the processes I just mentioned. But like I said, it's mostly grey hydrogen that is being produced and being used today, which does cause greenhouse gas emissions. And these days, the discussion is now on clean hydrogen, which is a very different form of hydrogen, which is how to produce and use hydrogen without emitting any carbon, and then really use hydrogen as a substitute for some of the energy forms we're using today to reduce our carbon emission.
So we understood from previous shows that green hydrogen, to be able to do that, you need to use renewables. But I want to just go back a little bit. You said 50 million tons of hydrogen is used currently right now. I mean, what is the equivalent of that, and what is it used specific? I mean, it's shooting out 830 metric tons of carbon dioxide. That is exponential amount of carbon. Why is so much carbon dioxide coming out of so little hydrogen?
Oh, actually, it's a industrial process, right?
Okay.
So for the fossil fuel, for every molecule of natural gas, and then you have to split between the hydrogen molecule and the carbon molecule that you have to emit. That just the amount of carbon dioxide you emit by taking natural gas and then making it into hydrogen.
So this is just the chemistry, the periodic table that we actually
exactly.
know. So then the major problems are in the industries and the companies and the factories that are actually doing something. What is done on them to push them towards green hydrogen? And we're going to be touching up on climate change. How do we actually fix that up with them first? Because I see, from what I hear from you, they're the issue, they're causing the problems. Am I right? Am I wrong?
So I think that's a great question, which really is about how do you look at the existing users of hydrogen and then let them adopt green or other low carbon forms of hydrogen to replace a grey hydrogen. But I think a lot of the discussion today is much more beyond that, is to say how do we use clean hydrogen to substitute other forms of energy that we use today. So for example, the adoption of hydrogen into long-distance road transportation, really to replace diesel. How do we use hydrogen for high-temperature heat, which maybe today at the moment is using coal or natural gas to create the high temperature heat, using hydrogen for the production of steel, which today is using coal or natural gas. So I think today the discussion around hydrogen or the use of hydrogen to decarbonize is much more and beyond the existing users of hydrogen today, and is to really think about how do we, if we take a step back, if we look at global energy use, I would say to decarbonize, 50% of those energy use can be electrified. So if you use renewable power, then you can decarbonize 50% of this. But then that still leaves 50% of the sectors that can't be electrified. That's hard to abate. You probably hear that a lot, hard to abate sectors. What does that mean? That these sectors are difficult to replace their existing energy form with just clean electricity. So hydrogen really then becomes a form of energy carrier, really.
Energy carrier.
Exactly. To decarbonize those industries like long distance road transportation, marine,
yes.
Using hydrogen for steel production, using hydrogen to produce
sustainable
transition. Aviation fuel. Exactly.
Okay, now this brings me to, I can see oil. I know it's getting into my car and actually giving it energy for me to move on. How is hydrogen going to be given to us? Is it in the gas form? What do you mean by hydrogen carrier, energy carrier?
Yeah.
That is a bit complicated for me.
Yeah, sure. So, energy, there's calorific value in hydrogen. So if you burn hydrogen, there's energy content in that. And why do I say it's an energy carrier? So if you look at green hydrogen, for example, it's using renewable power to split water molecule into hydrogen and oxygen. Now, some of those power that goes into splitting or creating this hydrogen will be retained in the hydrogen kind of molecule. Or maybe that's one way to think about it, is that it's a way to carry, be a carrier of the renewable power. Especially if you want to store the energy for a long period of time, being able to transport it over long distances. I think hydrogen is one of those carriers. And also on the consumer end, by using hydrogen, there is no carbon emission associated with it. So that's why we call it a clean energy carrier, especially in the form of green hydrogen.
So let me understand right. With wind or solar, that is actually going into making that hydrogen, it carries it forward to the hydrogen, it's the best way I can call it.
Yes.
And then you take the hydrogen with whatever carriers, I'm hearing ammonia or in its purest form, and then you burn it, and that's what gives the energy out. And it's as clean as possible, and hopefully we can protect the environment and not change and add global warming to it. That's the whole cycle that we're looking at with this green economy with hydrogen.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay, I just understood that from what you just said. So I'm going to ask more about the technological sides of things, but that's going to be after the break. So let's come back after this break.
We play, you listen.
You talk, we listen.
You got something to say? We want to hear it.
95.4 in Muscat.
And 91 in Salalah.
Music, news, views, and everything in between.
TFM.
TFM.
Let's talk.
Welcome back. This episode is in support of the Green Hydrogen Summit that is on December the 5th and 7th at the OCEC. Make sure we see you over there soon. Now, my guest is Monica Trench. She is the Business Development Director of BP Oman. Welcome to the show again.
Thank you.
And we are going to continue with this question. What's the technological and financial support for the hydrogen initiative here in Oman first, then globally, so we can see the state of things? Then how can we get a leg up over here to use what exists so we can be leaders?
Great. So maybe let me give you the global picture first. So what is a technological support, so technology support?
Yeah.
I think hydrogen as a technology, it's a proven technology in terms of electrolyzer.
Hydrogen is a gas. So what do you mean? The hydrogen science?
No, so the production of hydrogen using electrolysis, so the green hydrogen production technology is proven, but it has never been deployed at the scale that all these projects have announced. So for example, now people are announcing gigawatt worth of projects. it has never been deployed at that scale. So I think from a technology perspective, we are still learning how to deploy at commercial scale. So I think a lot of technological innovation is required, more R&D, research, investments is required to really start the learning curve and reducing the cost of hydrogen production. I would say in terms of the financial support, I think that's absolutely necessary. I mean, if we look at a parallel in solar and wind, I think what really happened was there were countries that had some financial, provided some financial incentives that created early market, some subsidies, some financial incentives that created some early market, which then stimulated innovation, the cost reduction process, which then stimulated kind of a bigger scale deployment, which create a favorable environment for the scale up of these things.
Incubating.
Which is really what we need for hydrogen to really take off in the scale that we want to. So I think this is what's happening globally. I mean, if you look at today what's happening globally, there are about 50 hydrogen targets, policies, initiatives that supporting the starting of the hydrogen economy. And then you say, what is happening in Oman? I think actually this is a very timely question because just on Sunday we had the press conference by Vision 2040 to declare wanting to reach carbon neutral by 2050, and Ministry of Energy and Minerals then also outlined their green hydrogen strategy for Oman. And I think that was a really important step to outline the targets and ambition they have for Oman in terms of hydrogen production, right? Reaching 1 to 1.25 million tons per annum by 2030, and then and doing it 3 times by 2040. So I think outlining this ambition to the wider community, to potential investors, was a really important step to show that creating this hydrogen economy is at the forefront
of where we need to go,
the agenda,
and what needs to happen. So I'm hearing that this move was a good move for investors to come in, so we're able to create this incubational situation.
Yes.
How will it trickle down, and what does it mean to the citizen? And do we have to decarbonize and change and hydrofy, and I don't know what to call it?
Hydrofy, that's a good word. I probably should start using it.
Coined.
So what does it mean for citizens? I think its adoption of hydrogen probably would start a lot really in the industrial scale. As I mentioned before, hydrogen, it's a lot of times will be used to decarbonize some industrial processes that can't electrify, and they may be processes that I think there are countries that are talking about mixing hydrogen with natural gas into their natural gas pipeline. So in their homes, when they turn on the stove and burn gas for cooking, and maybe there's some hydrogen mix into it that reduces the carbon emission. So that's all possible.
And it will be safe hydrogen, right? Because it could be flammable. That's another issue citizens will start thinking of. I'm sure that's not an issue that we should talk about now, but I thought I'd bring it up because one of the things is the safety element of hydrogen that actually, so a citizen can pay attention to that and maybe create an industry around that. I'm trying to find how a citizen can actually benefit from this hydrogen movement.
I think there are many ways citizens can benefit from this green hydrogen economy. I would think one is in terms of upskilling, right? Upskilling that, or reskilling to make yourself relevant to the green hydrogen economy. I think, with all of this potential investments into Oman to achieve the hydrogen ambition, there will be a lot of new jobs created. And
you should be ready for those new jobs. Good.
Exactly.
Would it be fossil fuel experts moving to the hydrogen, or it could be new graduates moving into hydrogen?
I see both. I think there are a lot of professionals in the existing oil and gas industries that have transferable skills that can move into the hydrogen space. And I am myself an example of that, where I I worked in refining in my previous life, and now
Yes, how did you get into hydrogen?
that is a very good question. So I would say I started in hydrogen maybe from 4 years ago. I think really was driven by curiosity, really. I think maybe 4 years ago, this is where the whole decarbonization, achieving net zero, carbon net zero, the conversation really the momentum has been created, and there was an opportunity to look at a potential hydrogen investment. And I remember at the time, in our organization, we didn't have a hydrogen team, so there was no kind of clear space who should be looking at it, and why someone volunteered really out of curiosity. And I think the more I looked at it, the more I thought, wow, what an interesting space. But you know what? Even at the time, there were people who somewhat were skeptical, and they said, "Oh,
and
no one is
away.
Exactly."
You
and
just kept digging.
Well, they said no one's interested in hydrogen.
Yeah.
I also had people kind of making a joke about, "Oh, it sounds like some kind of Back to the Future movie." Remember in the movie there was this.
Yeah, the DeLorean power supply thing. Absolutely, I thought too. We like what's happening? The future is here right now. Really, we're going to work with hydrogen? Is there plenty of fossil fuel? Too many questions, but it was curiosity that got you in there.
Absolutely.
So use that curiosity to actually get yourself into upskilling, which is great. Now that we got into buzzwords, you were saying carbon capture, net zero, net neutrality, somebody mentioned that, and whatever it is that we're doing right now. This all probably started from the Paris Accord. What does it have to do with this hydrogen story, and where is Oman with the Paris Accord?
Yeah. So Paris Accord really is about the Paris Agreement that was signed in 2015, which is trying to limit the increase in global temperature by 1.5 or below 1.5 degrees Celsius. And why is this relevant to our everyday lives? And I think we all recognize that there has been climate change has been affecting our lives, that is creating more severe weather events than usual. So I think some of the examples in recent years are more droughts or severe droughts or severe floods in places.
Yeah, my favorite island, Vanuatu, is sinking.
Oh, right? Yeah. I mean, an example closer to home for me, perhaps, is in Germany. I think in 2021 there was a severe flood.
Yeah, there was a severe flood, absolutely.
Exactly, that it was unusual. And then and then this year we're seeing that there was severe droughts.
It's amazing. Floods, droughts.
Exactly. So extreme weather events, right? Unpredictable weather events, which has other implications in our lives. So that affects agriculture, crop yields, wildfires. We've been seeing in parts of the world like Greece, where we hadn't seen that before, in Australia, Canada. So I would say, it really is very linked to our everyday life, being able to achieve the Paris Agreement. And I think to your question, where is Oman in that? And I think the pledge that's been made by Vision 2040 to achieve net zero by 2050 really is in line with helping the world to, limit the temperature increase by 1.5 degrees.
Okay, moving towards that, would it be corporations, academics, citizens, public, private? I mean, the initiation comes from a decree. Who's going to move it? Is it BP? Who's going to be the initiators?
Yeah, so I think we all have a role in initiating this. So I think companies like BP, we're trying to invest more money into low carbon energy and diversifying our portfolio into places like renewable power and hydrogen. I think is one, because then we create the supply of clean energy into the world. I think, like you mentioned, I think in terms of research, academics, they all have a role. They all have a role in, creating the innovation that's required. I think universities, in terms of the university programs, educating the next group of talents to go into, workforce, that going into.
So you encourage
energy.
universities and schools to actually get into this hydrogen story concept.
Yeah, and your audience who, may be interested in science and renewable power and clean energy. I think, if you have any curiosity, look into it. And And that really could be kind of the beginning of your clean energy story.
Which is what we're hoping this hydrogen story will begin in you. That curiosity, that drive to upskill and increase the knowledge that you know so you can benefit this country and the world with this climate change. Okay, good. Well, we've reached the end of this show, but we've got plenty of questions for Ms. Monica Trench, and we will be coming back with part 2. Questions on industries. What are the drivers? Where should Oman focus go? What are the challenges and barriers on this? But until then, I've got one more question for Ms. Monica. It's 2050 right now. This is the future. How do you think we've done? How do you think you have done? And I assume you're going to talk in the past tense.
Okay. I would say it was a challenging journey, but it was worth it. And we all were very creative and collaborated to make this happen.
Are you rich from your hydrogen journey?
I like to think rich in knowledge and experience.
All right. Thank you very much. Well, that was interesting. We'll come back next time. Please stay tuned. And this episode is in support of the Green Hydrogen Summit that's on December the 5th and 7th at the OCEC. Make sure we see you there, both of us. Till then, take care.